Where should we start?
Yeah, where should we start? In all honesty, we've probably sat off camera thinking, do we need a script? What should we talk about? We're just going to try and be ourselves, tell you a little bit about our journey and where we're at today.
Yeah, so that's Mark and I'm Liam.
Yeah.
And we don't do TEDx talks often.
No.
In actual fact, we're all school friends, and we've known each other since the age of about 11.
11. How long ago is that now? We're going to give our age away.
26 or 27 years.
26 years. So the boys that met each other in year 7 at school were probably a little bit nervous starting secondary school.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say we're from good families, loving families, caring families. We were happy. We were sporty in different ways. I was a promising footballer. Liam was more martial arts. We were friends with everyone at school. We were friends with each other. We had a mutual best friend. And we were happy and everything was going well at school. And I'd say
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. And then things started to change. Things started to change for me, which you had probably found out about. Things started to change for you without me really knowing. So at the age of 15, whilst I was playing at Man City at the time, I became a young dad, which I really didn't handle well. It's at this age I developed a real dysfunctional way of dealing with stress, which was avoidance. Around this time, I was reintroduced to my real dad. My dad had left home when I was much younger. I started being around my dad much more. One of the things that I did with my dad was start gambling, and I'd say this was a turning point in my life.
Yeah. Are you going to tell them what your mum's job was?
Yeah, so my mum's job at the time was a family planning nurse. So when she came home and tried to give me the talk, I remember being quite embarrassed by it and ignored her. And a few months later, I was telling her that she's going to be a grandma.
Proud mum moment.
Proud mum, so it didn't go well. But that's the first time in my life that I had this stressful life event. And I know you had something probably a little bit similar, as you went through a bit of stress as a young lad.
Yeah, I did, and it's funny, I remember it was like talking to school when you had Callum.
Yeah.
It really stood out,
I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah,
I knew it. I was really embarrassed, but we were at a Catholic school as well. So
yeah, it wasn't common. Yeah, it was talking to school, and I think it was out there. It was in the public domain, and I think that's probably, it's actually a bit of a theme through our stories, really, which you'll probably get, which is, Mark had this massive event go on that everyone knew about, and I imagine that was quite difficult to deal with, and probably around a similar time, really. I was at school, got on with everyone, was no tearaway or anything like that. I was a bit of a cheeky chappy. At the age of about 13, 14, I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And around that same sort of time, my life event was probably a bit more secretive, in that my dad was sent to prison. I don't blame that for the things that sort of happened afterwards or anything else, but it just changed my circumstance massively. I felt like I learnt to lie and pretend. I'm sure you had to do the same. Lie about what was going on, pretend to be okay, and while all that was going on, I'd built a relationship with drugs and alcohol that would feature in my life for many years and was probably easier to turn to, I guess.
Yeah. And when I was going through sort of my tough life event and not handling it well and avoidance, I was reintroduced to my dad, and one of the first things that I did with my dad was going to bookies. I remember the feeling of that, and my first experience, although I was underage, was positive. I know yours is a little bit different with drugs. You describe it as a negative and you passed out and, as they say, whited. But my first experience and the door opening for me, I absolutely loved gambling, and I loved the fact that I had this thing that I could switch off from reality because I was a young dad at the time. Gambling was the perfect thing for me, where I could go and hide away in a bookies and switch off. And this was a massive turning point for me. I wish so much I'd not walked in the bookies at the age of 16, but I did, and it took me on a journey.
Something's just come to me, and 4 or 5 years of doing this kind of stuff, not TEDx talks. I've never asked you this, and it's literally just come to me now. So I'll quite often refer to that experience of drugs and alcohol at an early age as not about the feeling, because in all honesty I had a few negative experiences physically, like you mentioned, but it was very much about the association, the social, that kind of like party you always hanging around with, that kind of thing. I just wondered, when you first started gambling, was that part of it? Being around those like male role models and all that, was there a side to that? Was it social in that sense?
It was all different things going on that day. So I didn't really know my dad at the time, so it was a bit of dad and lad time when I was gambling with him, which I loved. I don't think my dad had watched me play much football at that age, so I remember getting praise off my dad when I'd won a bet, and I thought that was great. The money side of it, I felt like I needed money at the time because I was a young dad, so when I won some money, that first day I won quite a lot of money, and I thought, wow, that's an easy way of making money. And eventually it did become that, of this social thing of everyone going, oh, Mark likes to gamble and he's good at this and he's good at that. The truth is I was never good at it. I always lost a lot of money. But yeah, there was a few things going on really. It wasn't really the social as such, but more the relationship with my dad.
So getting back to, I suppose, the question, how did we end up here? Where did it, I guess we'll both answer this, where did it take you from that initial experience? Yeah,
so for me, placing my first bet at the age of 16, I obviously described it as this moment as a positive and winning money. It quickly spiraled out of control. I'd say by the age of 18, I was a full-blown gambling addict. Didn't know at the time. I just thought I had a financial problem. But as a result of that, my mental health was affected. I was getting in quite a lot of debt and getting in quite a lot of trouble, and cracks started to appear in relationships in my family. I was brought up off a single mum. Me and my mum were really close, and by the age of 18, she was threatening to kick me out of the house all the time because I wasn't paying rent. I was getting debt letters through the door. And again, this just got worse and worse over a period of time where I owed lots of different people money. Despite that, I went to work and developed quite a good career. I went to work every day in a shirt and tie, and in my head I thought, well, I've got it all going on now. And underneath it, I was sort of losing all control, really. I ran off to different countries. I got attacked with an hammer. I was kidnapped at one stage. I owed a life-changing amount of money in the end. I had failed suicide attempts. And in the end, I just thought, I've ruined my life. There's no way out of this. And if anybody's watching this now, please understand there is always a way out of any situation, what you're in with addiction. I was almost losing all hope, almost at the stage of giving up. And at the age of 29, I'd lost my family, ruined my career. I wasn't allowed to see my 2 children. There was help and support waiting for me. And thankfully, I reached out and got that help, and I stuck to it and managed to turn my life around. I'll let you go now and tell them how bad you've been.
The stories actually intertwine a bit, really, and I think that's probably
which
the
is
biggest,
an important part of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's probably the biggest part of how we got to here and sitting here. But yeah, so I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol probably at the age of 13, 14. I did have that life event go on that just changed my circumstance really, and kind of gave me a lot of independence and freedom that I abused. I turned to drugs and alcohol more and more. But unlike my previous perception of drugs and alcohol, I actually still went on to hit the kind of milestones I was expected to hit. So be that college or uni, and kind of like being seen as fit and healthy and all that sort of stuff. But I just did it all with drugs and alcohol alongside. It was just kind of like propped up. When you're younger, it doesn't really stand out, and everyone's doing similar things, aren't they? The fact you might do it slightly differently or whatever didn't really jump out. I had no knowledge of addiction, no knowledge of mental health, and I'd say I was in my 20s when I started to notice that things were becoming a problem. For quite a few years I functioned. I got involved in a career, and I probably binged quite a lot, that kind of thing. But slowly but surely consequences started to come as time went on. I'm trying to give the short version here, but ultimately I changed. I was tired, I changed, my behaviours were getting noticed. I was married, I had 3 kids, and I just wasn't being the person that I wanted to be. And over a period of time, although I might have been seen as successful, be that because of martial arts or the company and job I was involved with. I felt like a failure, and I started to act like one. I started to get severe consequences, and it was probably around that time really that my old schoolmate, who'd turned his life around, started sticking his nose in, and I didn't really want to hear it, to be honest, but I think I was kicked out of my family home. I crashed 4 cars in a week, and it was about then when I actually thought I need to speak to that lad who's been sticking his nose in.
Yeah, and do you know what? And this is like the ripple effect of someone getting help. If I'd not got help and support at that time from the rehab that I was at, I would have never been too alarmed about your behaviour. It was sort of normalised because many lads of our age were doing them certain things, but because I'd got help and support, I was able to think, well, they're the warning signs that I missed. And like you said, I was sticking my nose in and asking questions, and that's all I did at the start. I started to ask questions that maybe other people wouldn't have asked. I remember Liam sort of shying away from them questions, looking away. The eye contact wasn't there, but eventually, a few months later, I was the person that you reached out to. And you describe that moment as sort of life-saving. I just describe it as being a mate and looking out for someone, but you know, them questions, sometimes asking someone how they are, challenging the behaviour, can be life-saving.
Yeah, I didn't know it was kind of like life-saving at the time. It's only looking back really that I realised how bad things were, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't say that lightly, to be honest. That was a massive turning point, and it wasn't plain sailing from there either.
No, and you know, we're 2 lads in recovery now. Just because we've managed to turn things around, it doesn't mean our life is simple today. If anything, you know, we say a good thing about recovery is you get your feelings back. A bad thing is you get your feelings back, and you have to deal with things. Stress comes your way. You've not got that substance or a behaviour that you can latch on to. But if anything, it helped us both understanding each other a bit more. We're not perfect, but we've been able to support each other through some challenging times and be there and look out for each other. And we've also got some fantastic help and support around us.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, you talk about that journey. So shortly after reaching out and sitting with Mark and trying rehab and everything else, I actually went living with you for 4 months. So my initial help and support that I had around me was Mark's flat.
Yeah. So it was in that flat. Liam was staying with me. He was at his rock bottom, and we started to talk about what we just shared with you. We started to talk about our stories. Liam knew of my gambling, but didn't know to the extent. I knew Liam struggled with drugs, but I didn't know he'd started taking them at school. And these 2 worlds started to sort of get explained to each other, and thinking, wow, and you know, this information that we were given at a young age saying do not do, no one ever told you if you did do these things where you could go for help, how you could fix yourself. And we started sort of working through our lives and talking about it. And on the back of that, we sort of thought there might be something in this, and this is when we started to have discussions about the job that we do today.
Yeah, I think very much around that, you know, those early discussions and kind of thinking there's experience here in the sense that it's an experience that if we'd have heard, it might have made a difference. Yeah. And I think that was like a big thing really. But yeah, thankfully the job we do today isn't quite what we discussed 5 years ago, and it's evolved a little bit. Yeah. But ultimately we use our lived experience today. Yeah. We do a lot of work around prevention and awareness. And I guess bringing it right back to that initial question, how did you end up sitting here doing a TEDx? Yeah,
so that's our journey really of addiction, some of our recovery. But more importantly than that, as much as we've just mentioned, we do this as a job, it's about the people close to us that it's impacted. Yes, it has turned our life around. Yes, we are better people, but then people that were close to us that we didn't mention much in our stories then, that we took along for the ride. Our loved ones, Liam's wife, my mum, have benefited from us turning our life around. And as much as we love the job that we do and we can have an impact with thousands of people up and down the country, it's probably them people the most, the ones that are close to us, that have a smile on their face now, that makes it all worthwhile, that we both asked for help and we both stuck to it and turned our life around.
Yeah, 100%. I think, addiction might be a family illness, but recovery is a family solution, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.